Hi, everyone, and welcome to an evening discussion with Eve Rodsky, which I am super excited about. Just one logistical note before we get started. We are going to have time at the end for questions, but if you want to ask a question during our conversation, then please feel free to type it into the Q&A box and we will respond. So I am so excited tonight to be joined by Eve Rodsky, bestselling author of Fair Play and Unicorn Space, to discuss this very important topic of equity and household labor and how equity permits for each partner to find their unicorn space, which is that personal and rewarding activity that allows for one to find oneself and in turn to be truly there for one's family. So quickly before we start our conversation, for those of you who don't know myself or Cooper, my name is Erin O'Connor. I'm a developmental psychologist by training. I am a professor at New York University where I head the early childhood program, and I'm also chief of education here at Cooper. At Cooper, our goal is to provide parents with scientifically based information on parenting and child development to sort of quell some of that noise that's out there about parenting through a variety of different formats, including virtual parenting groups, one-on-one sessions with a seasoned expert in child development and psychology, also through intensive workshops on specific topics, and assemblies like tonight with experts in the field. So a quick introduction before we start. Speaking with Eve. Eve received her BA in economics and anthropology from the University of Michigan and her JD from Harvard Law School. After working in foundation management at JP Morgan, she founded the philanthropy advisory group to advise high net worth families and charitable foundations on best practices for harmonious operations, governance, and disposition of funds. In her work with hundreds of families over a decade, she realized that her expertise in family mediation, strategy, and organizational management could be applied to problems closer to home. A system for couples seeking balance, efficiency, and peace in their home. Eve was born and raised by a single mom in New York City and now lives in Los Angeles with her husband and their 3 children. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Eve.
Hi, Erin. Sorry about that. I was trying to get on a little earlier, just give you a hug virtually, but I'm glad we get to do this.
Thank you. I'm so glad we get to do it too. I've been looking forward to
And
this.
by the way, I love Cooper because I think the evolution of the early 2011, when I started Fair Play with just Facebook groups with people's just random advice, felt so isolating to me as a parent because I'm someone who's looking for data. So I wish I had Cooper then.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Even as like someone in the field, when I first became a mom in 2008, it was kind of a scary place.
It's a scary time. Let's just say that. All we had was what to expect when you're expecting. And we knew our child was like a jelly bean or a watermelon, but like that was about it.
Totally. Well, speaking of data, one thing that I love about your work and Fair Play, and that it really is rooted in data, and that the data has really borne out these kind of, crazy trends that we see in, the division of household labor across 17 countries. And
17 countries. Yep.
I mean, that is amazing to me. And
Korean translation is right back there. I like to keep some of the translations on the wall.
Oh, I love that. Well, can you talk a little bit more about, the trends that you were seeing and kind of how you saw those play out across all these different countries?
Yeah, well, I think what's nice is we're talking about gender roles. And so I think it's important to know, and I will say this to your audience and to those who join us in recording, that this is a 101. These are highly triggering topics. You think it wouldn't be, we're here to talk about dishes. It's way deeper and more triggering than this. So this is a 101. I just want to say that. A lot of what we're saying may feel uncomfortable, and you can just come back to this practice of fair play and these conversations as many times as you want. We're here for you. So I think that's important to say. The second thing I want to say is that I didn't set out, and Erin knows this, to be an expert on the gender division of labor. As a resolutely Gen X woman, I was absolutely giving those messages by the world that we were the generation that could do anything, that gender was not going to be a hurdle, that reproductive rights had been fought for us, that our place was outside of the home and the workplace. We didn't have to ask our husbands or our fathers to get credit cards like our mothers did, or to open a bank account. We were in a world of no-fault divorce where we didn't have to stay married. So there was a lot of great things happening, I think, for Gen X women, especially in the older millennials. But it didn't pan out that way. And that's how I came to Fair Play. I came to Fair Play as a breakdown in my own marriage. I'm still married. My partner is letting me tell our story, Seth, because it was so helpful to us. But I want to say one thing before we start about gender roles. Men are doing more. So I want to say this is not about bashing on men, even though I do have a lot of rage from my days before Fair Play. Men are doing more. Gender roles are changing. But the problem is, Erin, is women are not doing less. Yeah. And so things are getting worse for women almost, because the expectations of what's on our plate are just getting more difficult. And so we can unpack that, why. But I think that the good news is we're going to be talking about some of the hurdles, but then we do have some individual solutions.
Can you talk a little bit more, excuse me, about why you think, because I just sense that even being a mom in this current sort of environment, that it does feel, and I will agree, like my husband does more, I would say, than he did Fair Play, but it feels like more and more and more and more is being expected of women.
Yes. So, yes. In fact, I was thinking of you, Erin, because Seth got this and he sent it to me because he thought it would be fun to share with you. I will definitely not read you the entire email he received, but what I believe is happening is I believe gender roles are changing, but the tasks of daily life are getting harder. I think it's harder to get into college. I think that income inequality has made it a lot harder to afford life. And so everything is getting, the expectations of social media, everything is getting harder. So Fair Play, what it's become, it's a system. It's based on 100 cards that I developed for you, so you don't have to do it. These are the 100 cards. If you have a child, there's 100 that you could play with. Hopefully you're not playing with a full deck. If you don't have children or this is a roommate relationship, you hold 60 cards. But even the cards that were available that we were quote unquote playing, Erin, and we'll talk more about the system, in say the 50s or 60s or 70s, say meals, after school activities. Like I went to PS40. My after school activities were just at my school. You just checked a little box in a form. You stayed after school till 5. Then I walked home. My mother got home late. I was a latchkey kid. I put my brother to bed. We a lot of times just opened a Chef Boyardee can. We would put it in the soup. I remember the taste of that ravioli so well. We would watch Three's Company, and then we just went to bed. Like that's sort of the working class lifestyle that I remember. So compare that to extracurricular sports now, where even like the play of the P has now been replaced by professional in many places. So again, gender roles can be changing, but the work is getting harder. So the one thing I wanted to read, which I thought was funny, and that we can go into why, is this was something that Seth got today about extracurricular sports for our older, just one of our children. It was the title of the email was number of games and meals needed. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I'll just show you what people are dealing with. As of now, we have a total of 24 game days, including both the fall and winter league games. My son's only in 9th grade, by the way, not even varsity or junior varsity. This is just 9th grade basketball. There are 12 members of the freshman team, so we could easily split it into 2 games per family. However, I'm still waiting to hear back from the head of the black and red booster group and varsity team parent on the possibility of a taco truck coming to campus for our home games. 5 total. This would count as a team meal with families contributing a small amount of money for the truck. If the taco truck gets approved, that leaves 19 games. So we can all be in charge of 1 meal, but for the 7 remaining games, I'd like to be considered everyone's time and ability. So please let me know your preference. A, ask for volunteers to sign up to cover the 7 remaining games. B, pitch in to cover the 7 games with someone responsible for buying food. C, let's not provide meal on Saturdays or for winter break. Once we decide the number of assignments per meals, and it just keeps going on and on and on. So I think that's what's happening. I think life is getting a lot harder.
I would agree. And I think also the, sort of inequities around that get larger and larger, right? Like my older daughter, who's also in 9th grade, was saying, my school provides all these opportunities for things that quote unquote will look good on your college resume, right? To do. She's like, but what if I didn't go to a school that provided all those sorts of opportunities? So it's like, well, all this stuff is being put on our plates, then it's, other folks don't have the same opportunities put on their plates, and that's a different sort of pressure, right? So
100%, but it's not easier for anybody in the fair play world that we mirror the U.S. Census, and it's not easier for anybody because, in fact, if you look at again households of color, like Black women are 80% of Black women are the primary breadwinner or the head of household. So imagine holding all of these cards by yourself and trying to also work for pay. So regardless of whether you have help in the house or whether gender roles are changing, part of the fair play movement is to try to take some things off everybody's deck. That we're almost at a tipping point of a life that is literally a recipe for burnout. And I think, unfortunately, we've told women for too long that a walk around the block or waking up at 3 a.m. is somehow the way to solve for that. Yes. But really, Erin, all I can tell you from the data, now studying this for over a decade, is that the only way to cure the burnout that we're talking about is to invite men to step into their full power in the home, and so that women can step out into their full power in the world. That's number one. And number two, that women have to believe that they deserve to be consistently interested in their own lives, that they're more than just parents, partners, and professionals on repeat. And so those two things, inviting men to their full power in the home and having women hold a boundary that they decide that it's not their fate to hold all the unpaid labor in their home, is really the fair play movement.
And I think what's so interesting too is that out of the fair play movement came this idea of unicorn space, right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? We're talking about sort of just being at the breaking point. And it seems to me like finding one's unicorn space can help sort of retrieve oneself from going over deep into all of this.
And this applies to all genders. This applies to single parents and obviously LGBTQIA families. But what has happened, again, with all this intensive parenting that we're talking about, is it's very easy for anybody, for all of us, to lose our identity. And we're now seeing identity loss in men. When you look at postpartum depression in men, that's some new data. But what happens, I believe, and one of the best metaphors I can give you, is I have my own initial on my neck, on my finger, all my jewelry, bracelets say E. Do not wear your children's initials on your body. Do not wear them. Do not wear a mom necklace. The world's going to remind you that you are a worker. The world's going to remind you that you're a parent. The world will remind you that you're supposed to be a partner, AKA women are supposed to change their names. So even in your last name, you may be reminded. But very rarely are you reminded to be yourself and to go back to those intrinsic values that once guided you. So that was a byproduct of the fair play research, Erin, where over and over again, I would ask women, why are you the one who picks up the phone call when your kid is sick? You say you're in a dual ambition household. So why are you the one who's picking up the kids from school? So obviously in the more, sort of the more basic answers, well, my partner makes more money than me. My job is more flexible. We heard that a lot, even though doctors would tell me that and their husbands were lawyers, and you switched it and the husband was the doctor, the woman was the lawyer. Same thing, their job is more flexible. We would hear things like, well, in the time it takes me to tell him, her, they what to do, I should do it myself. That's why I pick up and deal with it. Or we're both colorectal surgeons, but I'm better at finding time, and my partner is better at focusing on one task at a time. The problem with all those messages is what they're doing is they're convincing women, because we become complicit in our own oppression, that we have to do this work. It convinces us to breach a boundary around our time. Mm-hmm. So if you're the one picking up the call when your kid is sick and picking them up, what you've done is you've now said, my child's illness is more important than my time. And so we do that over and over again. It becomes a death of 1,000 cuts. And that's sort of where the burnout for women starts, that we're not predictable on our schedules. Women during the pandemic were interrupted in one study every 2 minutes and 32 seconds. So I can give you the system of fair play, and we'll talk about what the system is because it's fun to use. But the truth is, any healthy organization, including your home organization, requires 3 things. It requires boundaries, systems, and communication. And so what we're talking about right now is the boundaries piece. I can give you all the systems in the world, but if you're telling me and you believe that your time is infinite, you can find time. And your partner's time is finite, like a diamond, right? And you're going to guard their time, then unfortunately that boundary breach around your time will never allow you to hold that boundary to say, I'm not going to live like this. I need a true partner in this home. Or I need my children to step up, or I need my community to step up. We will not ask for what we need unless we believe that we deserve time choice over how we use our day. That's why Fair Play is a movement, not just a book, because we're out there convincing women all the time that their time is diamonds. And I'd say that is where you asked me about unicorn space. It's a long answer to say that unicorn space, Fair Play is a book about the system. If you believe your time is diamonds and you are ready for an easy way to divide up labor in your home, start with Fair Play. If you're saying to me, there is no way I could ever approach this conversation with my partner or my community, start with Unicorn Space. It's a book that teaches you how to reclaim that boundary around your time choice.
Interesting. So I think what's sort of struck me with reading your work too is that necessity of saying, okay, why? Like you talk about, we're having these conversations either. I love how you kind of give the example of like throwing the wet laundry on, but you're not speaking to your husband about not doing the laundry. We're sort of having these conversations in various ways already, but we're not delving into sort of the why.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit more about
let's play that. Let's play with that concept. So if tonight is 101 to introduce you to the boundaries, systems, and communication formula for a healthy home organization. And if you don't believe me, your home is an organization. An organization is just any people within a set system that need some clearly defined expectations. So your home is an organization. And I hope you start treating it as such. That's where my data comes from. And so I think it's really important, Erin, for us to realize that when you have a home organization, even my Aunt Marion's Mahjong group, Erin, has more clearly defined expectations in the home. It should not be that way. Yeah. You don't bring snack twice to her group, you're out. Whereas one man who ironically actually works in organizational systems said to me his home is one where they decide who's taking the dog out every single night, right when it's about to take a piss on the rug. So all we're talking about here is this idea of how do we back into a place where your division of labor is not based on your gender roles, but is based on clearly defined expectations in advance. Yeah. I'll say that again. Tonight's conversation is moving your gender roles from assumption on your gender to clearly defined roles clearly defined tasks in advance based on conversation. That's the boundary systems and communication formula. So I think one of the most important things I can tell you about that is, unfortunately, we have to tackle, as I said to you earlier, the boundaries and communication even before I can get you to the systems. So what do I mean by that? Well, I have so many people saying to me, there's no way my partner would do this at the standard I want them to. And I would ask them, well, when was the last time you had a conversation about garbage? When was the last time you had a conversation about teacher communication? What was the name of one of your spouse's teachers? How did he go to parent-teacher conferences? Did they go to parent-teacher conferences? Who went? Who grocery shopped in your home? So I'd love to play with you to show you how little we communicate about the home, because it's going to feel really strange to have the type of conversations we're about to have. So I'd love to just model sort of what we're talking about today. And then, yes, so this is, let's model this. So before, again, we'll talk about the system. If you are ready, and there are partners out there who just want to listen from this part on, we will get to how you actually do the system. But before, to onboard, any system needs to be onboarded. And I have to practice and teach people how to communicate. Context. My day job is I'm a lawyer. For 15 years, I've worked with families that look like the HBO show Succession. I'm an expert in systems. I'm an expert in organizational management. I'm an expert in governance. And what I found, Erin, was that it was very hard for me to get the patriarchs, imagine the Logan Roys of the world, to say to me when I was brought in by their family office to work on their succession, not only anything about their succession plans, but I would walk into these rooms, Erin, and these men would say to me, it was mostly men. I definitely have some women clients, but it's a lot of older patriarchal men. And they would say to me, I don't need you for succession help because I'm not going to die.
Wow.
And so over 15 years, what I had to realize was I can't get anybody to communicate here. These people have no idea how to communicate. So what I used to say to them was, oh, well, I noticed every time your second son starts speaking, you walk out of the room. Have you noticed you do that every single time? I'm asking for a communication shift, not a start, similar to fair play. We're all communicating about domestic life. One CEO told me she dumps wet clothes on her partner's pillow when he forgets to put them in the dryer. That's communication. You're all communicating. I can go on your Nest Cam tonight and I'll see 5 ways you've all communicated without even needing to hear your voice. We communicate about domestic life. So I'm asking for a shift, not a start. And I think especially when reluctant partners hear that, they say, okay, if we're already communicating, I can do a shift and not a start. So let's talk about the onboarding for what communication practice looks like. So the first thing I ask people to do is to, and we're going to play, is to understand your own vulnerabilities. So this is what we're going to play. So I'm going to ask you 5 or 6 vulnerabilities, Erin, and you're going to tell me, and I'd love for anybody here to play along. And then we'll go into the system, but we tackled boundaries. Your time is diamonds. We're tackling communication now, and then we're going to move into systems. So play with me. So what's your partner's name? Or if you don't want to give me their name, just let's give me a fake name.
Oh, sure. Kevin.
Hi, Kevin. We love you. Okay. So I want to know what Kevin would say about you. This is like a reverse newlywed game. But again, because we don't practice communication, in fact, nobody looks at it as a practice. And I'm here to tell you it's your most important practice, just like exercise, just like meditation. I would ask you, what would Kevin say about you? So picture a time that you had a fight, or when your emotion was high, your cognition was low. Maybe your child used the communal helmet and their head's itchy and you think maybe they got lice from it and they were supposed to bring the equipment, or they forgot to turn on the alarm system and, something's going wrong now. So whatever it is that you feel like maybe your emotion was high and your cognition was low, I want to know if Kevin would say, one, that you, and people can weigh in here too, what they would say, but one, that you, that you're long-winded, that you don't stop talking. 2, that you use sharp commands, that your tone is very sharp, drill sergeant-like, or nails on the chalkboard. 3, that you use all or nothing language. You always forget to do X, you never do Y. 4 would be toxic word choice. You're the worst father that's ever existed in the entire world. Like you've stolen our children's dreams or whatever. I've heard worse. Or 5, I didn't have this conversation. I avoided this conversation. I really avoided this conversation. And you think I have a short wick because I blew up on you, but really I've been waiting to tell you this for months and never did. So avoidance and then eruption. What would Kevin say?
He would say I'm an all or nothing.
Oh, okay. So give me an example of
Even
what.
though I know you're not supposed to do that, I do it.
Oh, exactly. But that's the whole point. We can all be trained. We can all, even marathoners can know what to do, but they still have to actually get up and run and practice, right? This is a practice. I think that's what I'm trying to explain to people. And when you bring some humor into your communication practice, it really allows for some levity, because most people will say to me, I tried to discuss this in 2005. It didn't work. That's like going to your doctor's office and saying, are you fit? And then you saying, yeah, I took a Pilates class in 2005, so I'm all good. We laugh at that, but people don't look at communication as a practice. This has to be practiced every day, just like exercise. And so the beauty of bringing the practice is when you understand it's a shift, and then you can own your own vulnerabilities, it's much easier to come to the table for a fair play conversation, for any conversation. So the way that typically looks is, hey, Seth, that's my partner. Okay, my vulnerability, I know, is I am a nails on the chalkboard. I know that I could say to you, I love you, but you're going to think I'm going to say something mean because my tone is always incredibly sharp. I'm always yelling. And so it's probably not that fun to communicate with me. And so again, you say, okay, I'm doing nails on the chalkboard. I'll come back later. So the goal is to know your own vulnerabilities, so you can come to the table with some humor, and then recognize that most of that vulnerability checklist I just gave you for communication, most of those vulnerabilities will come when you're giving your partner feedback in the moment. Mm. So all or nothing behaviors doesn't typically happen on a Valentine's Day where you're sitting there alone saying, you always order the wrong wine. It just doesn't work that way. It's usually in the moment. Like, you always forget the backpack, or, you never help me here. Like, weekends are so hard. You're never helping, so it's typically when we're giving feedback in the moment. So if anybody takes away anything from tonight, even before we get to the fair play system, it's that communication's a practice. Your partner should be the person you're practicing with. Come to the table as a shift and know your own vulnerabilities.
It's, knowing your own vulnerabilities, I feel like is so important, right? Because sometimes it's easy to maybe even know them, but not sort of work with them.
100%, because again, it's hard to examine yourself.
So hard.
Again, even if you're a person in a mental health practice, even if you're someone like me who's believes very much in therapy and has worked really hard, it is very, very hard because it's just the way of neuroscience. We do not allow our prefrontal cortex to engage. We go straight to that lizard brain when things are hard, and kids make things really hard. So part of the system of fair play is saying, instead of it's you versus me, or scorekeeping, or you never help me, or stop asking what to do, you should already freaking know. Part of the fair play practice is saying, back to that man who says he's not going to die, what did I start doing? I start to gamify my conversations. So instead of saying to him, well, if you're not going to die, I don't need to be here, what I would do is I would bring succession cards. They're sort of like fair play cards, but for business, where you'd see pictures on them. And I'd say to people, picture your legacy. Oh, really? Why did you pick the bike? Because you had a paper route that got your interest in media. Interesting. Oh, your grandfather actually owned newspapers in the old country. Like, I had no idea. So you get people talking using cards. And so in all of my practice, I've been obsessed with cards. And I want everybody here at Cooper to know that, again, this is not for you to say we're not here making a plug for a product. This is on fairplaylife.org.com. All of this is a free resource. This is part of the Fair Play movement. You can go on to Fair Play Life and find all of the cards, how to play, all of that on there. You don't need the deck, but I'm showing you the visual because I think it's very triggering to look at how much work it takes to run a home and family. But that is where we start. We start with understanding that part of what we're going to be talking about now, and the second part is sort of how to engage and move into a place where it's you and your partner against the cards.
Well,
as opposed to me versus you. That's the goal.
and I think something too that the cards do is, you talk all about making sort of the invisible visible. Like
Yes.
I was just talking to Kevin the other day about, yeah, it's going to Ashley's tennis match. There's a lot that leads up to that, right? And we hadn't really talked about what leads up to us both arriving at the tennis match, and often it's me figuring out who's driving and how she's getting there and who's going to provide the snacks, and having that conversation alone just really helped, I think, Kevin realize how much work goes into all these things that we do, that there's the visible, but there's so much invisible behind it too.
Okay, so yes, let's delve into the system. So, what is fair play? Again, as I said to you, these are 100 cards. They're not here for you to throw them at your partner. They're not here for you to score keep. What they're here for you is to onboard into a system where perceived fairness is the goal. We know from studies, actual fairness is very hard to measure. What I'm looking for both parties is perceived fairness. So perceived fairness can look very different for many families. It's not a prescriptive solution. This is a system that works for any type of family. So what you do with these cards is you're ultimately going to divide them up based on ownership. Who holds the entire card? The great sin of fair play is if you break up a card. And so I'll explain what that means. In 17 countries, the premise of fair play became this idea, Erin, that when I had all of these tasks, I had been collecting them in a should I do spreadsheet for Seth. That didn't work. Lists alone don't work. It's just spoiler alert. What I realized was I couldn't get accurate data. This was in 2011. I was doing the snowball research effect because there was Facebook, but there wasn't like Instagram or TikTok. So I was trying to mirror the US Census. Now we've spoken to people in 17 countries. But I was trying to get data in families. For example, who's the one who taught your kid to ride a bike? Oh, we both did. Who's the one that handles health insurance? Well, we both have it. Who buys gifts? Well, Erin probably more than me, but we both do. So I was getting very frustrated because I could not get accurate data. What do you mean you all both do everything? There's no way, because you're telling me you're overwhelmed. This person's saying they don't know their role. I know that there's something missing here. So I had to change my question, which was the big breakthrough for fair play in 2011. And the question I started to ask was, how does mustard get in your refrigerator? Once I asked that question, it changed everything. Because what I was able to then glean, and in 17 countries, the great thing about mustard is that it's actually a pretty international condiment. And if it's not mustard, you can find a different condiment to use in a different country. But what I found out, and this was consistent even in the Nordic countries, was that women married to men, and again, we can talk a little bit about how this applies to same-sex couples. There are some substitutions of assumptions. Gender sort of gets assumption by who makes more money. A lot of lesbian couples, people are doubling up on work. So they're both coming to all the field trips. So a lot of not efficient anywhere. Let's just say that. But in women married to men, what I heard when I asked, how does mustard get in the refrigerator? What I heard from a project management perspective, from the organizational management side of what I was listening for, was that women were telling me that they were the ones who noticed that their second son, Johnny, likes yellow mustard with his protein. That without yellow mustard, Johnny does not eat dinner. He douses the protein in the mustard. Okay. In the business world, we get paid big bucks for noticing new things and coming up with new ideas. That's called conception. So I'd write down conception. Then I would hear, oh, yes, I'm the woman, and I'm also responsible for monitoring the mustard for when it runs low, and also getting stakeholder buy-in from my family for what they need this week from the grocery list, and in addition to meal planning ingredients. So I was like, oh, wow. So there's a plan. And they didn't actually say stakeholder buy-in, but that's what I was listening for. That's the planning stage. And then I would hear from the couple that the men would then take over. That's where the both came from, to go to the store, to go buy the yellow mustard. And they're bringing home spicy Dijon every fucking time. And Eve, you want me to trust my partner with my living will? He can't even bring home the right type of mustard. That's the cycle of interviews I went into. And so the great insight as an organizational management specialist was what I was hearing was that there are two things an organization needs that are missing from the home. That is accountability and that is trust. And once that's missing, you go down sort of a rabbit hole of, well, I should just do it myself, and a lot of resentment. So to solve for that, the goal is to keep conception, planning, and execution together. If I hold the gifts card, VIP means very important persons in your life, then I hold that gift card. I can redeal it to you for another holiday, but I hold it. I conceive, plan what those gifts are, and I execute and go buy them. I don't ask you to go to the store with a list at Target on Christmas Eve and tell you what to buy. If I'm in charge of health insurance, just like anybody who's in charge at work, I can consult Erin in the planning, but I own this task. In the beginning of my fair play journey with Seth, when I held every single one of the cards and he held none, one card changed our life. Again, it's very different now, but in the beginning, I wasn't looking for 50-50. I was looking for anything. And what Seth was able to understand, similar to you, Erin, with extracurricular sports, was that he genuinely believed he held the extracurricular sports card for our kid because he showed up at the Little League field consistently on time on Saturdays. When I explained to him the conception behind extracurricular sports was serving my kids' friends for what sport they even wanted to play, researching leagues, and then the planning of signing up for an 85-person text chain for 3 different practices a week, ordering equipment on Amazon, returning it when it doesn't fit, borrowing equipment, giving it back at the end of the season, organizing a coach's gift, figuring out when snack parent day is. Once Seth understood that there were maybe 17 or 18 tasks behind getting to the Little League field, we were able to realize that I got about 5 to 6 hours of my week back by Seth taking over and owning just that one card. So that's the fair play system. CPE, when you hold a card, you hold it with full conception, planning, and execution. And really, it's that easy. But it's not as easy because we don't come to the table, because we haven't communicated, and because we breach our own boundaries. If you have boundary systems and communication, it is life-changing for a couple.
You know, you use that word resentment, which I feel like comes up a lot, right? When we think about things like household labor. Can you kind of go a little bit more into that and what, you know, when you did all your interviews for Fair Play, sort of the role that how resentment develops when we think about household labor, and then the role that that plays in the relationship?
Well, it's interesting. I think it was Gloria Steinem, but someone said feminism takes a lifetime. And I think it's that death by 1,000 cuts. I don't think any of us realize that this is happening to us, but because we have no systems to support working families or families with children in America, especially, it does become a death by 1,000 cuts, where maybe you believe you're holding on or that you can handle this or your job could be more flexible. But as you have kids and the longer you live in a relationship where you have a helper and not a partner, the more that we see a lot of bad outcomes. So we see sex drive goes down for women if their partner is not an owner, if they have to treat their partner like a child, if a partner is the type of partner who says, like the employee. So let's just do it in employee terms. Erin, you hire me. You're so excited for my first day. You're excited for my second day. I'm there a week into my job, and I'm still sitting in your office saying, hey, excuse me, Dr. O'Connor. I arrived at work today. So do you want to remind me or let me know what I should be helping you with today? Right? That employee, I'm hoping, would probably not be working for you for that long. But in the home, we're dealing with that all the time, where because of our gender, we're assumed to somehow be the CEO of our household, a job I never took. And then we have these helpers who say, well, I'll help you if you just tell me what to do. That is a recipe for disaster. So we know women's sex drive goes down dramatically in that type of scenario. And in fact, women actually initiate in America over 80% of the divorces in this country. And most of them have a fair play story about resentment.
It's interesting to me too when you said before, like depending on where you're at sort of with all this, either you start with fair play or you start with unicorn space. Can you talk a little bit about, so if you're at the place where you're, seeking to be able to find those boundaries, and
Yes.
like what does that look like? Sort of what journey does that, do you take when you're starting with unicorn space instead of with fair play?
Well, I often think you do, back to your why, as we were talking about earlier. I think you need a why to be willing to assert boundaries. So if I'm signing up for a musical theater class, I tried out this. My middle son is obsessed with Sing. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
Oh,
There's a pig named Rosita in it. She signs up
love
for the
Rosita.
talent show. Because she's in that talent show, she needs extra help from her partner. And it's an interesting exposition into what happens when she loses herself and finds herself again in the talent show. But what I find often with, especially for a lot of people who've lost their identity, that happens when you haven't had what we call space to live any sort of consistency of interest in your own life around fourth grade. I notice when a child's in fourth grade, this exhaustion gap, this interest gap sort of rears its ugly head. So I wouldn't wait till your child's in fourth grade. Let's try to handle it earlier. But if not, and you're feeling that I don't know who I am anymore or my identity, part of getting it back is working on yourself first. It is that oxygen mask metaphor. And then it's almost easier to play fair play, because if you're out now 3 nights in a row preparing to play, somebody in our town in your community theater, then the division of labor will start to happen, or you'll be willing to insist on it. If you have a partner who says, oh my God, I've been waiting for a system, this happens with a lot of coaches and people in the military, actually. They're familiar with systems. They think their house is a shit show. They're full of decision fatigue. Absolutely start with fair play. But if you're in a place of resentment, of feeling like, why would I ask for fair play? Because I wouldn't even know what to do with my found time. Then I think unicorn space is the right place to start. So what is unicorn space? It's a concept that comes up. It's actually one of the cards. You have to hold the unicorn space card. In addition to self-care and friendships, that's what we call the happiness trio. People are most happy, even though I don't like that word, we'll explain why, when they have robust adult friendships, when they have an ability to have some real self-care, not commodified wellness like time to dye your hair, but actual self-care, walk on the beach with your dog, a meditation practice, whatever it is. That's great, but it's often not enough. Where we see the antidote to burnout is in what we call eudaimonic well-being, which is what this unicorn space is. It's the active pursuit of what makes you you. And that can change, but really what it is a return to your intrinsic values as opposed to extrinsic values. So extrinsic values are the community values, more children. Oh my God, I only have one child. Is that enough? Everybody around me has 3 kids. On social media, I see this person, her arms don't have under flab, so maybe I should, go to Cool Sculpt. So a lot of aging stuff. That weights, body stuff. So that extrinsic goals are not what we're talking about. We're talking about a return to your intrinsic values and goals. And when you can be interested in your own life, we call it values-led curiosity. There's a lot of great health outcomes. And so that's what we encourage for people, that they hold a unicorn space card. So for some, it may be golf. For others, it could be trapeze. I mean, we've seen, one woman said to me that she jumped into the Atlantic Ocean, Erin, because she is now a polar bear in Far Rockaway with her polar bear group, right? So the beauty is, it's unicorn space if after you do that task, you say to yourself, I can't believe I just did that. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a prescription out there for all of you of, I can't believe I just did that moments. Oh, sorry, I just lost you. I think I was frozen. Oh, sorry, I lost you. Hold on, should I come back in? Sorry, Erin. Okay, I don't hear you yet, but it's maybe it could be my computer. So let me see. Okay, maybe should I leave, just jump out and come right back in? No, I can't hear. Can anybody else hear Erin? Is it just me? Oh, Cynthia said we lost you too. Okay. Okay, we'll wait for her. Thank you for weighing in. Sorry, I tried to reset too. I lost you again. Well, if anybody has questions, I was going to say we could answer some of the questions. Maybe I'll go to the Q&A while we get Erin back. Okay. So we have naturally, my husband did not join, flaked to go to business dinner. Is this being recorded? Time wiser, more precious. Thank you for saying that. I want to address that. This is something that was a very big aha moment for me. That the reason why we, as often women, if you're here and you're a woman and you identify as a woman, we have been taught since birth that our time is less valuable than men's time. And if you don't believe me, then you just have to look at health systems. Most health systems still say things like breastfeeding is free when it's 1,800 hours a year. Other times we hear when women enter male professions, then salaries automatically go down. All around us, we're hearing messages that our time is less valuable than men's time. And then we internalize that by saying toxic things to ourselves, like I should do more unpaid labor because my partner makes more money than me. Or as we said earlier, our job is more flexible. Or in the time it takes me to tell him or they what to do, I should do it myself. Or as we said earlier, we can find time. So I'm here just to say we're not Albert Einstein. We can't mess with the space-time continuum, but we can start to hold an assertive boundary around how we choose to use our time. Okay, Erin, are you back yet? No, I don't know. This is the strangest thing. Okay, but I'll answer questions until we get you back. Since I think we have five more minutes of our webinar. Jay asked, how do you navigate the comparison to other partners? Oh, wow, your husband cooks, folds clothes, changes diapers. I think that's such a beautiful question.
It's a beautiful question.
Oh,
I think I'm back.
You're back.
You're
Yay.
back. Yay.
But I love this question, so please continue.
Well, I think this is,
wait,
is this echoing? Me echoing?
I don't hear, but
No?
I'll mute myself just in case.
Okay,
just in case.
So I think this is such a beautiful question because part of the journey, the boundary systems communication journey, we're talking about a partner here tonight in our 101. All we can talk to you about really, because we only have less than an hour, is the relationship between you and your partner. Fair play, gender roles is a relationship between you and the world. So one woman said to me, her partner and her had started to play fair play with her, but before that, his entire family and him included assumed she had a magical vagina that whispered in her ear what her husband's mother wanted for Christmas. So those are the gendered assumptions we're talking about here. They don't stop with your partner. If they are on board, that is why we called over 50 schools during the Fair Play research journey and asked them, why do you call women? It wasn't as easy as, oh, they're the first on our list. No. It was things like, we don't bother men. Men don't pick up. It's not our fault the children say daddy's working, don't bother him, call mommy. We have created an entire system of devaluing women's time and allowing for our interruption. And so that is something we all have to stop. And I'm here fighting for you on the systemic level of the Fair Play Policy Institute. But Jay, you can help by continuing to hold that boundary with your partner, do your good work. I love the questions because it means that other people are upset with your boundary or your relationship because probably they don't have what you have. Okay, Erin, I'll let you go. I think I lost Erin again. Can everybody hear her, or is it just me? Okay, well, we lost you again. So what I'll do is I'll answer our last question since we're almost at the end. So I think it's fine. It the question I want to answer is by Cynthia. Okay, thank you. Let's turn on your work. I'm like, yep. Family systems. I'm so yay, good. Okay, love it. The system is home logistics. Oh my God, amazing. Okay, so this is a very exciting thing. We, as a movement, we now have about 100 therapists, including you. Oh, I love what Jay is saying. Cynthia, it's so important because, like, what I want to end on is that the fair play movement is really here for all of us to believe that an hour holding our child's hand in the pediatrician's office is equally valuable to an hour in the boardroom. But for a society to believe that we can center care and it matters, we need LMFTs and psychologists to be able to work with couples, not by gaslighting them, but to say that I really, really, really value you and your time, and we have to work together with a qualified professional. Typically, therapists have never been trained in any gender lens or sociology that allows them to understand these issues.
I am so sorry. I hope you could all hear me now.
I hear you.
Great. It was trying to pick up my neighbor's Bluetooth. I'm not sure. Living in New York, right? Close spaces.
New York.
So I'm sorry I missed the last comment, but one thing that I just wanted to sort of, I know our time is limited, is I think something that, as parents, we often sort of harp on in a way is like, whatever I do, how is it helping or not helping my child? And I think you make such a compelling argument for how carving out this unicorn space is benefiting ultimately your children. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And I think parents have the hardest time with this, but what we found in our fair play research was actually the higher the socioeconomic status, the less room for unicorn space, except for golf. That was an exception. But we found that people who identified as working poor, middle class, they actually did have time for unicorn space. So it's not really a socioeconomic thing. And the things that were tying them to their community service, their active engagement with a lot of church choirs, a lot of synagogue choirs, a lot of things that were tied to our community and our religion that we no longer have to tie us to each other anymore. So those community institutions have gone away. So it's harder for people to find that community theater or a choir or a community service trip to go on because we don't have those institutions. So it does require more effort. But all I can say to you is what we know about the data. What we know about the data is that if you don't do this, then you don't really have a chance to be mentally healthy, because the mental health is not how to be happy. We've really hijacked the mental health conversations the past 10 years, and you know this more than I do. You talk about this too, Erin, but this gratitude journaling yourself to death is not going to cut it. We have to change our mental health framing from I want to be happy all the time, or I want my child to be happy all the time, to I want you and I want myself to have the appropriate emotion at the appropriate time and the ability and strength to weather it. Appropriate emotions for women are rage, resentment, anger at the appropriate time, which is pretty much any time because we're raising kids. But it's the ability and strength to weather it. How do you do that? sadly, what we see is if you don't have a unicorn space practice, what we've been seeing from women more and more is that they're going to hedonic pursuits, which I get, which are things like mommy juice, 2 glasses of wine a night, edibles, taking edibles starting when the weekend starts to just numb themselves through their lives. I don't want anybody to numb themselves through their lives. So when you have an appropriate emotion at the appropriate time, the key unicorn space becomes the ability and strength to weather it. It becomes an umbrella. Because again, it's a return to what matters, to the things that matter to you, as opposed to what matters to everybody else. You are more than a partner, a parent, and a professional. And we are here for you. I know there's a lot more to unpack. I didn't even get to go back to the Q&A. But we're happy to come back. We're happy to answer more questions. You can always DM me at Eve Rodsky or at Fair Play Life, or find us, like I said, online. You can sign up for our newsletter where a lot of these questions are answered. We have a lot of newsletters about special situations, Erin, like when a parent is a pilot, how do they play fair play? If someone's gone, is a McKinsey consultant, is in the military, how do you play? How do you get your kids involved? Can kids hold cards? That was our last newsletter. So we answer a lot of the specialty questions in our newsletter.
I love your newsletter. Definitely sign up for it. And I think we're sort of out of time, but something I would love to talk to you further about another time too is that 4th grade kind of time when we often find ourselves kind of losing ourselves in a way, and how as parents we can, if we find our unicorn space, how we can support our children, especially during that, I don't want to call it a rough patch, but a time when.
And I will say, Clover Klein, who I love, she's a developmental psychologist that we quote in Fair Play. She says, sorry, I hear you. Sorry. Okay, perfect. She says that if we don't have our own creative lives, if we don't know what makes us us outside, again, of our roles, then often what happens is our graveyard of unfulfilled dreams becomes the perfection of our children. So I don't, again, want any of that for you either, because that is not a fun pattern or cycle you have to break. And if you don't believe me, I'm sure our LMFT here could probably tell you that as well. So it is not a cycle we want. We don't want to start bringing all of our unfulfilled dreams into the perfection of our kids. So let's break the cycle now. Put your own initial back on your neck, not just mom. You are human, and we're here to support you.
Thank you so much, Eve. I think that's a wonderful way to sort of wrap up our webinar, and hopefully you'll come back soon.
Of course.
To explore some of these more in depth. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you all for coming.
Good night.
Bye. Talk to you soon.